They say the silence of a soldier is the most dangerous thing in the world. When I stood on the porch of the house I had paid for with blood, sweat, and years of service, I wasn't shouting. I wasn't begging. I was absorbing the cold rain against my skin, watching my medals, the very symbols of my sacrifice, scattered across the wet driveway like worthless bottle caps. They threw me out like I was nothing. But they forgot one thing: I wasn't just a man. I was a strategist. I was a ghost. And more than anything, I was trained to survive in environments where others would simply perish. My name is Jacob Turner. For 12 years, I served in the Special Forces. I've seen things that would make a normal man's heart stop, and I've endured pain that would break the strongest of spirits. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the betrayal of the people I called home. When I returned from my final tour, I thought I was coming back to a sanctuary. I thought my wife, Victoria Hale, would be there to help me navigate the quiet world of civilian life. I had sent every paycheck home. I had survived IEDs and midnight ambushes just to ensure she had the finest things in life: the house on the hill, the luxury cars, the status. But as I stood there that night, looking at my locked front door, I realized I had been fighting the wrong war. The enemy wasn't across the ocean. The enemy was sleeping in my bed, wearing the diamonds I bought her, and whispering secrets into the ear of a man I once called a friend. "You're a broken machine, Jacob," Victoria had said through the crack of the door, her eyes cold as flint. "You're twitchy, you're distant, and frankly, you're a liability to the social standing I've built here. My lawyer will send the papers. Don't come back." Beside her stood Tyler Morgan, a man I had known since high school, a man who had never spent a day in the mud or under fire. He looked at me with a smirk that told me everything. They had been planning this for months while I was overseas, coordinating a legal ambush that left me stripped of my bank accounts, my property, and my dignity. I had no car. No phone. No money. Just the clothes on my back and a small tactical bag they had missed in their rush to discard me. I walked away that night, not because I was defeated, but because my training kicked in. Rule number 1 of engagement: when you are outmatched and outpositioned, you retreat, you regroup, and you wait for the terrain to favor you. The world saw a homeless vet walking down the highway. I saw a mission. I walked until my boots were soaked through, my mind already cataloging the assets I still possessed. They took my money. They took my house. But they couldn't take the discipline. They couldn't take the tactical mind that had mapped out entire insurgent networks. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, casting a long, jagged shadow of a man who was supposed to be broken, I made a silent vow. I wouldn't just recover. I would become the storm they never saw coming. The first few months were the hardest, but pain is an old friend. I found work at a private security firm under an assumed name, doing the graveyard shifts that no one else wanted. I lived in a tiny, one-room apartment that smelled like stale coffee and ambition. While Victoria and Tyler were likely sipping champagne in my living room, I was eating cold beans and staring at a wall covered in maps and financial spreadsheets. I didn't want a quick, violent confrontation. That's for amateurs. I wanted a total tactical teardown. I began to use my military intelligence training to dig into the life Victoria and Tyler were building. Using my skills in digital surveillance and social engineering, I started peeling back the layers of their perfect world. It didn't take long to find the rot. Tyler Morgan wasn't just a charming socialite, he was a gambler. And not the good kind. He was deep in debt to people who didn't care about his last name. He had been using Victoria's, my money to cover his losses, but the hole was getting deeper. Meanwhile, I was rising. I wasn't just a security guard anymore. I had used my military background to start a specialized consultancy firm focused on high-stakes risk management. I worked 20 hours a day. I treated my recovery like a mission. Every dollar I earned was a bullet in my magazine. I invested with surgical precision. I moved silently. To the world, Jacob Turner had vanished. Then I met Isabella Stone. She was a high-level corporate investigator who had been looking into Tyler's shady business dealings. When our paths crossed, she didn't see a broken soldier. She saw a partner. "You're looking for more than just money, aren't you, Jacob?" she asked me one night over a desk cluttered with evidence. "I'm looking for justice," I replied, my voice steady. "They took a man's life and tried to erase it. I'm just making sure the record is set straight. We discovered that Tyler was planning a massive insurance fraud scheme involving Victoria's family estate, a property that had been in her family for generations, which she had recently inherited. He was going to burn it all down, literally and figuratively, to pay off his debts and flee the country, leaving Victoria to take the fall. The emotional weight of seeing the woman I once loved being played by a man even worse than her was heavy. But I didn't feel pity. I felt the cold, hard logic of a mission. Victoria had chosen her side. She had looked at my sacrifice and called it garbage. I began to move my pieces. I started buying up the debt Tyler was generating through shell companies. I became his invisible landlord. I became his secret creditor. I was the one holding the leash, and he didn't even know I existed. I watched from the shadows as their relationship began to crumble under the pressure of the walls closing in. I saw the frantic calls, the late-night arguments through the windows of the house that used to be mine. Victoria looked haggard. The status she traded me for was becoming a noose around her neck. I remember one night, standing across the street in the darkness, watching her cry on the porch. The same porch where she had kicked me out. Part of me, the old Jacob, wanted to go to her. But the soldier reminded me, she didn't want the man, she wanted the comfort. And she had destroyed the man to keep the comfort. I tightened my grip on the folder in my hand. It contained the final pieces of the puzzle. The evidence of Tyler's fraud, the proof of Victoria's complicity in the initial theft of my assets, and the legal leverage to take it all back. The mission was entering its final phase. It was time to come home. The day of the great reveal wasn't a loud explosion. It was a knock on the door. I wore a tailored suit, my posture straight, my eyes clear. I looked nothing like the man who had walked away in the rain 2 years ago. Beside me stood Isabella and a team of legal representatives. When Victoria opened the door, she didn't recognize me at first. She looked tired, her expensive clothes hanging loosely on a frame thinned by stress. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I think I'm the only one who can, Victoria," I said. The blood drained from her face. "Jacob?" I walked past her into the foyer. Tyler was there, sitting at the dining table, surrounded by overdue notices and legal threats. He looked up, his eyes widening in terror. "What are you doing here?" "Get out!" Tyler shouted, trying to summon a bravado he no longer possessed. "Actually, Tyler," Isabella stepped forward, "you're the one who needs to leave. Every debt you've signed, every loan you've taken, it's all been consolidated. The owner of those debts is sitting right here." I sat down at the head of the table, my table. I laid out the documents. I showed them the evidence of the fraud Tyler had been planning. I showed them how Victoria's name was on half the documents, how she was facing 20 years for a crime she didn't even fully understand she was committing. "Jacob, please," Victoria sobbed, falling to her knees. I didn't know. He told me it was the only way to save the house. "Please, you have to help us. We're being ruined." I looked down at her. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel joy. I felt a profound sense of closure. "I'm not helping us, Victoria," I said quietly. "There is no us. There is only the mission. I have already turned over the evidence of Tyler's schemes to the authorities. He'll be picked up within the hour." Tyler tried to run, but 2 of my security team were already at the back door. He collapsed into a chair, a broken man who had never learned how to fight. "As for you, Victoria," I continued, "I've purchased this house. I've purchased your family's estate. I've recovered every cent you took from my accounts, with interest. You won't go to jail, I've redirected the blame solely onto Tyler for the fraud, but you will leave this house today. With nothing. Just like I did. Where am I supposed to go? She wailed. I have no one. Jacob, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. A mistake is a wrong turn on a map, I replied. What you did was a betrayal of the highest order. You threw away a man who would have died for you because he was broken. You forgot that a broken sword can be reforged into something much sharper. I watched them leave. Tyler in handcuffs, Victoria with a single suitcase, walking down the same driveway where she had tossed my medals. I walked out to that driveway later that evening. I knelt down and picked up a small, dirt-covered piece of metal, my bronze star. I wiped it clean and tucked it into my pocket. The house was quiet. The war was over. I realized then that revenge isn't about hurting people. It's about restoring the balance. It's about showing the world that you cannot break a person who has already walked through fire. They begged me for help because they thought I was the same man they had discarded. They thought I would be weak enough to forgive because of a past that no longer existed. But they didn't understand that the man who came back wasn't the man who left. I stood on my porch, looking out at the city lights. I was at peace. Not because I had won, but because I had reclaimed myself. To anyone out there who feels discarded, who feels like they've been left with nothing, remember that the world's greatest structures are built on the ruins of what came before. Don't shout. Don't beg. Just plan. Be disciplined. Be patient. Because the best revenge isn't a strike. It's a life lived so well that your enemies eventually have to ask you for permission to exist in your world. And when that day comes, you'll find that you don't even care enough to say no. You'll just keep walking. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Your support means everything and motivates us to bring you more powerful stories. Drop a comment below and tell us which part of the story you like the most. And stay tuned, the next story is coming soon, even more intense and emotional.